Because it just frustrates me to no end that anytime anyone stands up for the Palestinian peoples, you're immediately shut down and accused of being anti-Semite. I've been accused online for my advocacy over the years.
You're a genius, you just got out of college, really. How would you define genocide, and do you think that what's happening is genocide?
It brings me genuine joy to be able to know that change is coming. And change is here, actually. We're always raised saying change is coming, change the world. And what happened when the kids that told that to in like preschool and kindergarten actually took that seriously? They changed the global narrative and international.
Grace and peace be with you. It is a joy to be with you for another episode of Holy Chaos. I'm Dean Owen Thompson, the proud Dean of Christ Church Cathedral, Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm here with my partner in ministry, Canon Brian Blair, our Canon for Mission. And we bring you another episode of our Holy Chaos. It is that place where we like to have conversations with those folks who are on the inside and the outside doing the work of disrupting, turning the tables upside down, right side up, if you will, with and through the power of love and faith and hope, justice, peace, equality, and reconciliation. I'm so excited to welcome a special guest, Layla Sheikh, who is a recent graduate from University of Cincinnati, and she's also a member of Students for Justice in Palestine. And she is on the front lines of bringing a light into dark places, hope amid despair, and truly justice amid injustice as we're witnessing in the Middle East today. And so I'm really excited to have you with us. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So what we basically do in this setting is we just want to have a conversation to learn a little bit about your story, what has led you to this place, and what's next for you. So I know that Canon Brian has some questions he wanted to ask you basically about where you are at this point in your journey.
Thanks. Well, you just graduated.
I did.
Congratulations. What was your major?
I was majoring in international affairs with a minor in Arabic language and culture and a certificate in legal studies.
Well,
Yeah.
do you have any plans?
Yeah, so I'm actually graduating a year early, so I'm going to use this year to get my hands dirty a little bit and just be more hands-on when it comes to legal aid in our community and some public policy, still really being involved in community organizing and activism. And hopefully I can make the decision by the end of the year to see if I want to continue my education and apply to law school.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
The things you listed that you are looking to do in this coming year, I know that a lot of those things you are doing. Do you want to tell us some more about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So, the main reason I'm here is I'm the founder and president of our Students for Justice in Palestine chapter at UC. And that is also now a nonprofit, 501c3. And so with that, I just, made sure that there was a space on campus for Palestinian students, especially, and also students who support Palestine and want to educate themselves some more. So through organized events, community actions, we would basically try to put Palestine at the front lines, whether it's through education or through disruption. And we would make sure that we're highlighting people who have lost the right to speak. Being a voice for the voiceless was always a goal that we had with every single event, every single meeting that we're doing. And so, with that, it just came about that I made a bunch of connections throughout the city of Cincinnati, whether it's helping out our houseless folks that are here, standing side by side with our Black and brown brothers and sisters, and just being really knees deep into all of the good parts and the bad parts of what's going on here in Cincinnati.
Well, you mentioned Cincinnati. Are you a Cincinnati lifelong resident? Have you moved here? What's your story?
Yeah, so I was born on the south side of Chicago, and it's the largest Palestinian diaspora community in the United States. So it wasn't really a choice for activism. I was just thrown into there. I moved into my first protest, I think, at 3 years old. And so being raised in that nature and then moving to, of all places, Cincinnati was definitely a transition. It's a really different city environment here. But that is what prompted me to make those spaces that I felt like were lacking, especially for communities like my own or people who looked like me or had similar ideologies to me. And so, Cincinnati's been my home for almost 10 years now. And high school, middle school, and then now college. So,
Well, we're glad you're here. We're glad for all your work that you're doing.
What about? Yeah, no, I echo that. I'm really glad you are on the front lines, particularly in this very tumultuous time that needs folks like you to stand up and bear witness to the atrocities going on for over some 70 or so years now, and certainly exacerbated to heights unseen in many ways. So, as you do this work, what do you find is some of the greatest challenges that you have experienced, thus far in your work, that keeps you going, and gives you hope and drive?
Yeah, I mean, nothing beats being able to actually see the cultural shift in spaces that you organize in, right? So going in and founding SJP my freshman year and now graduating and seeing all of these people who, to be quite frank, don't come from a similar background to my own, and wearing a traditional Palestinian scarf or shirts that have, chants in Arabic and chants in justice, and seeing people advocate and stand up for justice when they don't have to, I think is something that is constantly keeping me going, constantly surprising me, whether it's faculty, community members, or students. Just seeing them take that stance without having to be pushed to do so is something that's always really beautiful. And then also on the ground in Gaza and the West Bank, we've been able to foster a lot of relationships with Palestinian students, youth, elderly, and everything in between, and to be able to text them and talk to them and call them, and them letting us know that they are seeing Cincinnati. They're opening their phones and seeing what we're doing, and us being able to help them, whether it's through fundraising or just amplifying their stories. I would say it's one of the two most strongest factors that just keeping pushing keep going.
In terms of the pushback that we're seeing, certainly nationally and internationally, some days, what are you experiencing in terms of the? I know you mentioned some of the allies that you have. What about some of the adversaries that you've encountered along the way?
Yeah, I mean, all of this stems from fear and misinformation. And so there has been multiple personal threats to my safety, to my family, and the safety of my loved ones, my friends. Even most recently, I actually had about 2 weeks ago, someone had sent a threat to my house, which was about 45 minutes away from campus, and it was 5 pages long. And the last letter, it was about Mahmoud Khalili's case. I'm not sure if you're aware. A lot of students are being detained because of their activism. And it was basically screenshots of articles that had very derogatory terminology about these students, about people like myself, and then a handwritten letter on the end, which was actually the same handwriting that was sent to the Islamic Center of Greater Cincinnati about a year ago, that was directed to me as well. And again, just more derogatory language. This one even had a bomb threat that was insinuating. And so it's crazy that at 20 years old, people, are so enraged by the change and the impact that has come because of spaces that are literally just fostering education and spaces to combat misinformation and amplify stories that have been silent for so long. And, unfortunately, the list is very long of times where, people have harassed near my team, followed us around. There's this concept of doxing, where people will take your information, put on the internet. That's happened to me a few times. I had to change my number, change my phone. But at the end of the day, I always say fear is a privilege. So this sort of challenges that we're faced with is not be compared to the challenges that our brothers and sisters are facing in Palestine whatsoever. And so I have an amazing community here who's always keeping me safe and keeping me going. So, yeah.
As my Angela would say, steady rise.
You see how nice she was as she explained dancing to the old guys and everything. It's very nice of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Terminal.
They're old school on this. Some of the support, I'm so glad to hear about it, but I'm also a little bit surprised because, I'm a New Yorker, in Cincinnati about 4 years, back after some time away. And, one wouldn't necessarily see the Midwest as a place where one could find support. So I'm really glad that you have established that coalition of support for you. And so as your particular chapter of SJP, what's some of the next steps for that group?
Yeah, so our next president is in the works. Not sure if I should mention the name or not, but...
Wait, you're graduating, so now you have to turn over the presidency.
Yeah, but I'm still trying.
And it'll be a peaceful transfer of power?
Yes. I mean, he followed every single one of my demands this past year, made sure I trained him right. But yeah, he's from Cleveland, and his entire family is organizers up there. And so he came to UC. He's an amazing engineering student. Aniro Elkeani is his name. And he's been side by side with me this past year. So if you guys have come to any of our events, you know him. He's the brother with the mustache and the long hair. But yeah, so it's a very peaceful transition of power. But on that 501c3 aspect, I'm pretty heavily involved as a more advisory position. And then also SJP functions as both an on-campus chapter and now a community organization. So he's going to be spearheading now that on-campus presence, and then the more community presence will probably be more me and just, the both of us living each other in. So, yeah.
Can you talk more about the community presence? So you're a school organization, but you try to be involved in the wider community. How else are you involved with the community around Cincinnati?
Yeah, so, SJP was actually one of the first Palestinian organizations for our city. There was a coalition or an attempted coalition quite a few years ago, and it had kind of gone silent for quite some time. So we were the first, even the logo organized, established within the university, and also that 501c3 status. And so recently we established a coalition of over 18 organizations. Some are youth organizations, some are community organizations. And so the protests we'll see, the film screenings with some Mullen theaters, we did a Children's Day event. There's stuff where the audience isn't just students or faculty, but it's just the general public or parents specifically, younger children specifically. And even the other day, we just did a regular org fair. It's just called Protect Your Neighbor. Just know the different organizations that are available to you, different rights that you had. And so it's a lot more, educational, but it had more compacted sense than an hour, 2 hour teaching. Because, people have kids, they have lives they gotta get back to, so, yeah.
Well, how did the org fair go?
Went very well. We had quite a few organizations there. Some were completely unrelated to Palestine, and some were on the same sort of topic, like Cincinnati Palestinian Small Area Coalition. We had Cincinnati Tenants Union, HISIS Coalition, just different community safety organizations, like food bank, clothing, free clothing drives and things like that. And so it was really great, really wholesome event.
You said you're 20?
I am 20.
What were you doing when you were 20? I don't think I was doing anything like this.
I don't remember. I have no idea.
Very impressive.
That says a lot.
It's amazing stuff.
Indeed. I know part of your goals are about boycotting divestment, and you had mentioned, when we were getting to know you off camera here, you'd mentioned you did something pretty cool at graduation. Could you share that story with us?
Of course.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that just like I walked in with a bang, I'm leaving the university with one as well, and then a sort of really proud and direct statement, which, the entire goal of SJPs across the nation right now, especially just at the height of the genocide and what's going on, is for our universities and educational institutions to not be a place where we are funding moms and we are funding war. Educational institutions, if they have all this leftover money, should go back into our community, right? And so I had secretly hit a banner, and when I got on the stage, the board of trustees, the president of the university, have refused to meet with me for 3 years now. Anyone from my organization regarding our demands and regarding just even a sit down, right?
Wow.
And they would always give us lower level administration and things like that. So I wanted to make sure, hey, this is my opportunity to do so. I got a banner that said there are no more universities left in Gaza with bloody handprints. And they said divest from death and UC funds genocide. Because according to our research, the Israeli military does use UC's missile research that they have, and there's also an investment in Israeli bonds, which the state of Ohio is actually the second largest investor in Israeli bonds.
Oh,
and UC and OSU are top, there's top involvement in that as well. And so I wanted to make sure that they saw, and I was able to tell them, you should, be ashamed of yourselves. You're complicit in genocide. It has murdered my friends, my family, and so many of your other students. The least you could do is just divest, right? There's no need for you to reinvest that money into there, especially right now. And I was even more surprised by the crowd's reaction, and everyone was standing up and cheering, and the parents as well. And to me, that was such an impactful moment, because it's no one even knew where Palestine was on a map, or the clothing that I was wearing, or very little people did. And then to be able to walk across that stage and for one last time, not just show myself, but show the rest of our community here that people are waking up and they're educated. And it's a shame that educational institutions are not doing their due diligence when it comes to actually educating people, right? And just taking advantage and suppressing students who are doing those for disruptions. And so it was a really, I couldn't have gone better in my opinion.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What did you wear? I imagine you were intentional about what you were wearing. And then did this get all over social media? Did you see posts?
Yeah, I saw quite a few reposts and tags and things of that nature, but I was wearing a traditional Palestinian thobe, which is our traditional dress that women wear with tatriz, which is a Palestinian stitching. The specific thobe I was wearing is called the Intifada thobe. It's called the Revolution thobe, where it has Palestinian flags stitched throughout, and the Masjid al-Aqsa, like the Holy Mosque, stitched up here, and then it has Arabic, like Palestine, Free Palestine, things like that, and had like a little map and everything. And so the significance of this thobe is it was worn during times of revolution, where Israel outlawed any shows of the Palestinian flag, any symbols of Palestinian culture and existence. So the women would stitch it into their clothing as a form of protest, because you'd have to rip it off their backs if you want to, suppress their right of, showing their cultural identity. And so I thought there was no better time to wear it. So
I love that image and the story of the crowd standing and affirming beliefs and affirming you and the ordeal doing. As you are certainly entered into the breach and all these you're enduring, things that I can only imagine in some ways. What role does your faith play in terms of giving you the strength to endure, hope, and all that good stuff?
I mean, my faith is my driving factor in all of this. You cannot talk about the people of Palestine without talking about faith. The first words that come out of our mouths and their mouths as they're going through these atrocious things, whether it be Palestinian Christians or Palestinian Muslims, is them, just saying all praise be God, them calling out to God, and saying, God is sufficient for me. And they're holding their dead relatives, they're holding their children, and their houses are demolished. And the first words that come out of their mouth is praise to God. And so, for me, obviously, I'm a hijabi woman as well. I wear my faith, on people before they know my name, before they see me, they know I'm a practicing Muslim. And, I'm not wearing clothing or skirts and, loose serpent things. And so before you know what I'm standing for, that I am proud of my faith and that this is something that I practice every day. And so, with all of this fear mongering that's happening, with all this misinformation, how many times is it in our books, in our holy books, that there were all these prophets and all these different messengers who went through these journeys and had these terrible, like, the Pharaoh, the Nimrod, all these different biblical stories, all these different, examples in our religion of people standing unapologetically because they have faith in God and because they believe that there is an injustice that they must change. And that is something that is pivotal part of Islam. It's a pivotal part of Christianity and Judaism and all major faiths, right?
No. Well, Anthony, I'm going to turn up to a little more controversial, if I may. So I want to ask you this question. Why are you an anti-Semite? And, I'm putting my tongue in my cheek when I say that.
Yeah. Interesting way to put it. But, it's really disgusting, really terrible, in my opinion. And I mean, just in general, that people would even make the state of Israel and their actions synonymous with the Jewish faith. Not a lot of people know this, but this last semester, I was actually taking Jewish modern history under Judaic Studies at the University of Cincinnati. And so, there's a lot of this misinformation that comes that we're just hating, we hate Jewish people and all of these different rhetorics that divides and makes this a Muslim versus Jewish thing. But in reality, some of the closest organizations that we work with, like here in Cincinnati called Shema, are non-Zionist Jews, right? There's a political ideology that is synonymous with, some members of the Jewish faith, but there is quite a few in throughout history who have advocated against what's going on in Palestine. And like that first protest I mentioned at the beginning, it's ingrained into my mind that every single protest we've been to, there's these Orthodox Jews in their hats and in their curls and in their suits standing on the front lines of the protests. And so it has never been a Muslim versus Jewish thing. It has never been a concept of me talking about where I come from is somehow anti-Semitic. And it is never, ever our intention to do so. And, you know, it's not within the ideology of any single Students for Justice in House and any single Palestinian organization to criminalize and villainize people of a certain faith, because there were also Palestinian Jews. My grandmother grew up with Palestinian Jews, and it's just a part of our heritage. It's a part of, you know, the Palestinian people. And so to villainize and criminalize students for saying that there shouldn't be a genocide, that there should be a ceasefire, that there should, you know, be an arms embargo, and we should divest from the state of Israel as punishment for what they're doing. That's all nothing to do with the Jewish faith and everything to do with people in power committing atrocities. So,
in terms of the dialogic aspects of this work, certainly, you know, we're not going to accomplish anything unless we're talking with each other, certainly not at or over each other. So what kind of dialogue have you had with those who oppose? And have you been able to kind of open people's minds and hearts to seeing you for who you are, seeing the struggle for what it is, and so on, so we see each other through the lens of our common humanity?
You know, I think when we talk about dialogue, we have to understand that if someone is on the other side of the table who does not view you with humanity or does not view you as equal to another human being, how can I sit at the same table with you, right? Until you understand, you know what, maybe there is a fallacy in my way of thinking, or maybe I should approach this a different way. But if you come to me spewing out hatred, if you come to me spewing out that I don't deserve the right to exist, right, then I will not, you know, involve myself in dialogue, because that's just talking to a brick wall. And there's been so many times throughout SJP where, you know, the founders and presidents and Bearcats for Israel will come to our events and have these conversations impromptu. And it's like, of course, I'm not going to turn that down, right? This is a moment of education. But, you know, if we come in a very sort of attacking way, then there's no reason for me or anyone else in my community to waste their time with that. I don't have to defend my existence. I don't have to defend what I'm doing. But I think we've seen so many times, especially just within this past year and a half, a lot of students and a lot of community members who had a completely different thought, right? And they just push themselves by just showing up, even just sitting silently through our events, seeing what we're saying, and then coming up to us and asking us these questions. And then they became consistent supporters and were able to understand that, you know, this is not a religious issue. This is not a political issue. This is a human issue. There are human beings that are dying right now. And so that's, I guess, the extent of dialogue that has happened.
Because it just frustrates me to no end that anytime anyone stands up for the Palestinian peoples, you're immediately shut down and accused of being anti-Semite. I've been accused online for my advocacy over the years. And to your point, how do you engage someone who just wants to shut it down by labeling you in a certain way? But I applaud you for just, you know, shilling up and being the present and being open to those who are being, you know, willing to listen and
My controversial question was, you used the word genocide. And almost like what Owen was referring to, if you say certain things, then you're accused of certain things. You're a genius, you just got out of college, really. How would you define genocide, and do you think that what's happening is genocide?
Well, yeah. So, you know, when we talk about genocide, and I mean, lucky for you, I'm an international affairs major, so we talk about it quite a bit. There's no limit of, like, it has to be this number for it to be considered genocide, or it has to be this tactic for it to consider genocide. You know, we started using genocide relatively recently when we talk about things like, you know, what happened in Serbia, right? It's called like the Srebrenicide. When we talk about, you know, the Holocaust, when we talk about Rwanda, when we talk about these different events that have occurred recently throughout history, where there was a group of people, and then there was another group of people, and the other group of people is trying to annihilate this entire group, right? They are trying to cut off any form of living, any form of sustenance. So that's starving, that can be demolishing houses where there's no infrastructure that can be rebuilt, that is murdering people at gunpoint, that is bombing, hospitals, schools, civilian residencies, just things of that nature where you are obviously not targeting other militants, which would make it a war, but in genocide. And especially in the context of Gaza had about 2.2 million people before October 7, 2023. It was one of the most overpopulated strips of land in the world. It's only about 20 miles long. So the average household had about 10 to 15 individuals living in it. So when you bomb a residential building and when you target schools and you target hospitals, you're not just targeting the average family. You're targeting at least 20 people that you cannot identify. That is men, women, and children. And the average age in Gaza is relatively younger because of how much there has been consistent wars. So the majority population is youth. The majority population is women and children. So when you're not targeting, actual open areas and you're just targeting heavily populated areas, that is an act of genocide. And that's not even considering shutting down the Rafah border, the Israeli apartheid wall. The only option is for people to swim. And then even then, Israel controls the sea with their navy and then the air and the land. So nothing can get in and out without their permission. So if they want to starve a people and just continuously bomb a 20-mile strip of land, which they've done, that is an act of genocide. And they're not allowing, aid. They're not allowing different organizations in. So what else is that, right? Like, you can give me another word, I'll use it. But right now, there's no other word that is out there other than genocide.
And you mentioned apartheid, and I know that whenever genocide or apartheid are used, the people bristle on the other side of the issue, bristle towards things. From the apartheid movement in South Africa, have you all seen any useful tools that they utilized towards bringing that evil to an end? Is there any type of sharing of ideas and history along those lines?
For sure. I mean, you cannot talk about Palestine without talking about South Africa. You cannot talk about, the Arab people or the Palestinian people's movement without talking about Pan-Africanism and about talking about just the Black experience throughout the world. So there is something called Black and Palestinian Solidarity. We've done this meeting every single year. And so there's actually a statue of Nelson Mandela in the West Bank of Malala. And, Nelson Mandela's grandchild has, his grandson specifically, has been a very, very vocal advocate of what's going on. South Africa literally brought the International Court of Justice case about genocide. And so there has been resource sharing since the 60s. There's a photograph, which I have from my room. It's a really nice photograph. But it's of the Pan-African Cultural Festival in Algiers in the 60s. And you see members of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Black Panthers, members of resistance fighters from South Africa, and just different resistance leaders throughout Africa sitting together, resource sharing ideas. And so when you're looking at apartheid and when you're looking at even things like Jim Crow, for example, what Israel is doing in their tactics within Gaza and outside of Gaza, the West Bank as well, is sort of this like hybrid of the both, and then making it a sort of modernized and palatable thing, which is what we call normalization. And so when you look at what happened in South Africa and what's happening now, yes, now technically there's no apartheid, but even when there was apartheid, they still called themselves a democracy. They still called themselves a fully functioning and recognized government. And even now there's disparage in just the economics of South Africa. There's about, I think, 98%, and this is again the number that's from our presentation, but about 98% of all land and property during apartheid was owned by white Afrikaners, and then that last 2% was, the native indigenous, Zulu African tribes that are in there. And guess what the number is now? Any other guesses?
I'm not too hot thinking what it was. I've been in school in a long time, so
about 95% is still owned by white Afrikaners. So yes, now there's no apartheid, but the systems of oppression are still there. And so when we're looking at the future and when we're looking at now, we understand that, South Africa, the youth was a really pivotal part, and they shook up the system, and they were unapologetic in their stances on what they're doing. But still, there are systemic, disparages that are there. And so when we're looking at Palestine right now, the youth have it at the forefront. The youth, all of our team is required to read a bunch of stuff about, just different South African uprisings, their strategies, these different things, balancing the concept of disruption, of resistance, of peace, of negotiation, normalization, what that looks like. So I think there's unfortunately too many examples of similarities between what's going on now and what has happened in the past, and we hope to learn from the past.
Yeah, indeed. Go ahead. I could have 1,000,001 questions, but I know our time is limited. I do want to ask this question. Maybe Brad will chime in afterwards. Is the you do this work? We all see the daily headlines. We all know the current environment which we find ourselves is further exacerbating the situation. Just today in the news, it was reported that Netanyahu is going to expand the war and expand occupation of territories as well, which all that can be so disheartening. All that can be want to make one lament, and again lose hope and just kind of want to run and hide. You have stepped in to this breach. What brings you joy? Because you're 20 years old, the world's ahead of you. Is perfect as it is. But what brings you joy in addition to your faith? What's the wellspring you draw from that just makes you you share that smile that you have with us at this moment?
Well, I mean, I'm Palestinian, right? And so it's in my blood that my existence is a form of resistance. So us laughing in the face of occupation, there's so many videos, so many photos of children, women, men just getting arrested and brutalized and smiling, the biggest smile on their face, because they understand that they did something to hurt and bring this, empire down to its gates, right? Where they had to take action against you. They had to resist against you. They had to repress you. And so seeing that now, the U.S. in the context of the things that I'm doing, it brings me genuine joy to be able to know that change is coming. And change is here, actually. We're always raising change is coming, change the world. And what happened when the kids told that to in preschool and kindergarten actually took that seriously? They changed the global narrative and international. There were encampments that popped up everywhere, all over the world. And ever since then, the students are unapologetic in their stance, and they're the most radical and the most brave when it comes to the movement right now. And, we all channel that joy from the lived experience of Palestinians. It's in our culture to just exist and be happy and smile. And that is just highlighted by our faith. And so it's just perfect couple.
Before you add something, because I know you're chomping to share, I do want to jump on that because you may know the story, but I pre-read it up in, it was in Desmond Tutu's book. I think it's No Future Without Forgiveness. And he talked about a moment where the apartheid police and military came in during a church service and put trained guns on them. Desmond Tutu looked at him and with a big smile, and he said to them, "You've already lost." And said, "Join the dance," and they all did dance, and the guns were willing, they left. In that same spirit, and based on what you just shared with us, would you say rather definitively, or somewhat definitive, I guess, that Israel's already lost? At least those purveyors of apartheid, occupation, and genocide have already lost.
100%.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, my friend. We've never seen Israel be so unstrategic in what they're doing and the way that they are attacking, the way that they're hitting the, villages that they're burning down. They have never been so unstrategic. And, it's been great, just like South Africa during the time of apartheid, with this concept of the PR of what they're doing, right? We're the only democracy in the Middle East. We have a vegan army. Women are also have to enroll. If you're a member of certain communities, you're going to only be accepted here. And versus all these other terrible countries who are bordering us. And now everyone is seeing through that facade. Yeah. And so they can have all the military power in the world, but the world had looked up. And at the end of the day, your next leaders, your next presidents, your next kings and queens are of the generation that woke up a little earlier than we all had anticipated.
Yes. Even many Israeli youth are waking up too to realize they've been brainwashed, they've indoctrinated into this fallacy. Man, thank you. That does.
Well, you said vegan army, and now all I can think about is a bad punk band. You've mentioned faith a few times. You're here in a church. We're very grateful that you're here. And we're grateful just for this occasion. And maybe, we could have this conversation and post it out to an audience and let people know that we're collaborating together. I would love to know what you think we and our listeners could do to partner with you.
Yeah, like my number one thing that hops in my head is the concept of safety and security, right? Right now, students are being criminalized and villainized for standing up for justice for any cause. And so when we had members and institutions like the church, who has been a pivotal part of Cincinnati, and the community members who are connected to a plethora of different people, being able to see you guys show up for us and come to our events, or even vice versa, us being able, to show up and educate your own community here, is an act of sort of adding that real safety boundary and barrier. Because it's really easy for these agitators and for these people in power to look at us and be like, well, you're just this small little angry college kid coalition, versus when they see that the, entire city of Cincinnati and I know people who go to this church, or I've been to this church myself, and they're also telling me what I'm doing, the way that I'm treating students for just simply standing up for what's right is crossing the line, right? And so you're able to have that barrier of safety, that barrier of protection. But I just ask, every member of your congregation to just open up their minds and hearts a little bit and reach out, get involved, and let us, foster spaces together.
I just want to thank you, not for being with us, but also for, your willingness to stand up and take on the mantle and entrance to the breach into the work and so desperately needs to be done. And for being an example of what I would describe as prophetic courage, that you really are. You're an inspiration. And I think as we all are committed to this common work, common life, that I hope there's stuff in that collaboration that we can learn from you, certainly. Just one last thing, if I could, can you define for us a few lines to do what your definition of hope is?
It's of course, Matt. Well, there's a term in Arabic called tawakkul, which is having this undeniable faith in that everything's in God's hands, right? So for me, hope is understanding that, God will put in my life and move blessings or tests that I need right now, and that it is only from a that fit, right? And so to me, that's how I would describe hope. And then specifically in regards to Palestine, there's another term called sumut, which is this like undeniable steadfastness. And so sumut plus tawakkul to me is like my favorite combo. Is faith in God, this undeniable, I'm just leaving everything to Him. Whatever happens, happens. And the steadfastness is, I tie my camel. I do everything that I can in my power, and the rest I'm up to God. So that's how
You have an active hope. Let that. Thank you so much.
So talking about things like misinformation, disinformation, can you help us know how to access good information so we can get as educated as possible around the issues?
For sure. Our rule of thumb, especially when it comes to Palestine, is first and foremost finding people on the ground, right? I mean, you find individuals who are living through, but more living through genocide, and are able to do the simplest thing of not even saying anything, just picking up a camera and showing you what's going on, is something that you can't deny, right? There's so many young journalists throughout West Bank, throughout Gaza, throughout Palestine in general, who are recording your lived experiences. And then if you're looking for a news source, we always recommend Al Jazeera English. Israel has tried to suppress them so many times and shut down, their offices because of their accurate reporting of what's going on. And they work, again, directly with journalists on the ground and directly with, the health ministries and institutions that are available throughout Palestinian society. And then last but not least, I would say looking into literature and books, right? When you read and reread from a different lens, very revolutionary figures like Malcolm X, like Maya Angelou, like Nelson Mandela, every single one of them have mentioned Palestine in their literature and in their speeches, but no one really catches it unless you're really looking for it.
Well, I just want to thank Layla for being with us and for all of you for tuning in for yet another episode of Holy Chaos. And please visit us at our website, and information will be provided, and also with some possible links to other resources that can educate you further on this very important issue, this moral, spiritual issue, ethical issue of our time. I'm just really thankful that we have an amazing person, an amazing group such as SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, at the forefront of this moment and this movement. So thanks, Brian. Thanks to our team. Thank you all so much. Take care.